So today I'm going to be talking about this lens. This is the Canon 11 to 22 f4 to f5.6 millimeter wide-angle lens. This is a lens I just got a few weeks back, took it on a cruise, and the other night I went into New York City with it. So let me set the scene for this. We're here in Brooklyn tonight, and I'm going to demonstrate the 11 to 22 millimeter Canon lens, the third one in my little review of the three lenses that I bought a few weeks back. And this is a great spot to photograph, and I come back here often. So I brought my wife Nancy with me tonight. Say hello.
Hi.
And I'll be shooting around here tonight and see how good this lens really is. It's a wide landscape lens. That's the Brooklyn Bridge behind me, if you can see it. Yeah, there it is. If you're ever in New York, definitely want to head over here. If you've seen some of our other videos from this spot, it's one of our favorites, and it's someplace that you definitely want to come when you're in New York City. But I'm going to take you to another side of this area. This is called Dumbo, and there's a great shot of New York City skyline with some pylons coming out of the water, and I've taken images there many times, and I want to compare this lens to my Nikon's D750 with the 16 to 35 Nikon lens, which is a $1,000 lens. And the lens I'm using here was about 300 and change. It's the Canon 11 to 22. And it's not a fast lens, so the aperture, I think it starts at f4 and goes to 5.6, and that doesn't really matter because I'm going to be shooting tonight probably at f8 and above. I'm not looking to get shallow depth of field shots, and even like right here when I'm shooting a vlog like this, this lens is perfect for it. And right now I'm at 11 millimeters, and that's my arm stretched out all the way. So as you can see, it's a nice wide lens. It's a comfortable field of view if you're going to use it for vlogging. So we'll see what I can get in a little while. So behind me are the pylons that are sticking out of the water, and I'm going to actually go, I don't know if you could see it, but kind of like right there's a bunch of photographers hanging out, and they're here every night. There'll always be photographers here. This is one of those touristy spots that if you're visiting New York, you're going to come here if you're a photographer and try to get the shot I'm going to take in a few minutes. So I'm going to turn around, and then you'll see behind me is the Manhattan skyline, and that's the shot you want to get. And the reason why everybody comes here is because these pylons that are in the water, I don't even know what they are, they add some interest. They add a little foreground. So we're going to head over to the spot for the shot now. I've been taking a few shots, and it's actually it's a quiet night tonight, and it wasn't a great sunset because the sun was actually there were no clouds, nothing to reflect the light. It just kind of went behind the buildings and nothing special. So now the second best part of it is blue hour. And so what's happening is now all the lights in the buildings are actually bouncing out between the sky and the buildings, and that's when you can get some really, really cool shots because you still have something in the sky. It's not completely black. So anytime you're shooting, just after sunset, you kind of want to wait till the light balances out. If there's any light in the, whatever structure you're shooting, whatever, and between that and the sky, and you get a perfect exposure, and you won't have to edit it much either. Okay, so back to shooting. Okay, so I found a nice street light here to wrap this up. Got some nice images, I think. So when I get home, I'm gonna edit them, and I might wrap this video up there with a little, kind of my thoughts on the lens. Also going to be dropping in some images from the cruise that I was on because that's where I first used this lens. And the thing I love about this is it's small, it's lightweight. The whole camera setup is actually really tiny. I have it here so you can see. I mean, look at super tiny little setup. Get the screen on. Really light, easy to walk around with. The tripod's not heavy. Just a very compact system, perfect for traveling. Okay, so the next time I see you, I'll be back at home, and I'll have some images to show you. So I'm back home, and I edited all of the images from my little excursion the other night. It was a nice night, a little cold. The crowds were light because of the coronavirus and everything that's been going on. So we were able to just walk around, get some shots, got back in the car and left. So it was a quick little shot into Brooklyn from where we live on Long Island. Now, this lens, as you can see in the walking parts of that clip, it says stabilized, but the stabilization really isn't that great, I have to be honest. I've used other lenses, and even my little Sony Action Cam has much, much better stabilization than this. My phone has better stabilization than this. So if you're going to use it to walk around and vlog, just know that it's not the best for that. Now, when I was standing still and holding it, it's absolutely fine. It's a nice wide field of view. And you know, it works perfectly for that, or doing a talking head video like this, perfectly fine. You'll have no issues with it. But I wanted to test it for photography. It's a pretty small, compact size lens. If you look at it here, it's really not that big. It's not the, you know, it's got like a plasticky kind of feel to it. It doesn't feel terrible, but it's not a solid feeling lens. It's okay, and I get that. It's not an expensive lens. As a comparison, this is my Tokina 11 to 16 2.8 lens that I had originally bought for my M50 as the wide-angle landscape lens that I thought I was going to use. And here's the two of them next to each other. So, I mean, as you can see, there's a big size difference here. And I ended up not really using this that much because of that. As I was using this camera more and more, I started to really like the native M mount lenses for it. I decided to get this to use as my wide angle. I was using the kit lens that I have on the camera now as my wide angle lens, but at 15 millimeters I wanted to go a little bit wider, so this gives me about a you know, 16, 17 millimeter equivalent, which I really liked. We went down to that spot there, and I'm going to start showing you some of the images that I took there. I had the camera set up on a tripod, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute because I had some issues and I wasn't sure what they were, and I think I have it figured out. But I had my tripod set up in this spot. I actually had it very low to the ground because I wanted to get these rocks in the foreground. So here's the first image I took. The sun hadn't quite set yet, so it's a little bright in the background, and there was nothing going on with this sunset. It was a, you know, not a cloud in the sky kind of night. So I dropped in a couple of images from previous times that I've shot here, but here are a few more. And as you can see, you know, and that's one of the things about going to shoot at the same location over and over again. You never know what you're going to get as far as skies, weather, things like that. So you'll always end up with different images. As it started to get darker and the city lights came on, that's when you start to get that nice balance between everything. And I took a couple of images where I'm showing you the raw shot right out of the camera, and then here's the edited version. Now these edits didn't take me more than, you know, 2 or 3 minutes each. It wasn't a big deal. Once you learn how to use a program like Lightroom, these type of edits become routine. It's not some fancy anything. It's a couple of slider moves, and it's not a big deal. So as you can see, you can get some pretty impressive images with the dynamic range in the Canon M50 and this lens together. This one here is an HDR. This is the only one that I took that's an HDR. I took 4 exposures going from dark up to the brightest where it was a little overexposed, and I blended them together in Lightroom, and it gave me an HDR. And I have to be honest with you, I was able to get the images the way I wanted without having to use an HDR. So it really was something I didn't need to use in this situation. In really contrasty situations, it might be worth doing a couple of sets of bracketed images just to have it in your back pocket. So when you get back to editing at home, you have, you know, some room to play with different images at different exposures, and sometimes you can't get the sky back if it's overexposed, or there's not enough information in the shadows, and then you're kind of stuck. So if you have this, you can always blend them together and then work on it. As you can see, the images are all fairly simple. I moved around a little bit, got some different angles, but there's really not much, you know, here. You can try to shoot shallow depth of field if you wanted to, like if I had a 50 millimeter 1.8 or 1.4. I've done that before where I've taken shots and like isolated the pylons in front of me and the city was out of focus. So you can get creative in a spot like this. But the shot that people come here for is the big wide landscape shot. And this lens didn't disappoint. The images are sharp. When I put lens correction on, there was no distortion, you know, very little. It was just a really, really good lens, and especially for the Canon M50. So I would highly recommend this lens. Now I moved a little later on in the night. We were walking back to the car and we walked along the waterline there, and I wanted to get some pictures of the Brooklyn Bridge. And as you can see here, these are all blurry. And I could not figure out what was going on. My camera was set exactly the same way. I didn't do anything differently. But I think I figured out what happened. I wasn't using my good tripod. I was using my Mi Photo Road Trip, which is, you know, it's a decent tripod. I've had this one for years. I use it when I do these videos at home. But whenever I'm out shooting, I usually take my Faisal. But for some reason, I just decided I'm going to take this tonight. It had the right ball head on it, and I went with it. But what I was finding is I was doing 30-second exposures in this area, and the last leg on this tripod is super thin. I mean, it's so thin that I can bend it with my hand. So I think what was happening was, even though it was a still night, I was still getting some movement in the camera. So with the 30-second exposure, I wasn't able to get a sharp shot. So that's something you have to think about. You know, people say some tripods are very expensive, and you know, I don't want to spend that kind of money, but you have the cameras, you have all the lenses, and then you go out there, and if one part of your system fails, it ruins the night. You know, if I didn't bother to take a look at that and try to figure out what's going on, all of my shots could have been, you know, a mess. But the reason why the first ones was because I was shooting with the tripod only open about this far. So I didn't even have the legs all extended, and I had a nice sturdy, you know, place to put my camera. That's why, you know, going forward, I'm going to only use my Faisal tripod because I know it's sturdy and I don't have to worry about it. And this is the tripod that I had with me with this lens and camera combination on my cruise. And here are some images from that. I was looking through the metadata, and I used this lens the most on the cruise I was at. I think I took 150 something images with it. And here are just a few of my favorites, and everything was tack sharp. I had no issues with anything. Really enjoy using this lens in a lot of different situations. So this is a lens that I'm very happy with. I recommend it to anybody that has a Canon M mount camera. It just performed well. If you're going to be using it for vlogging and video, maybe not the best. I don't know. That's going to be up to you. You're going to have to decide how you want to use it. If you're going to be in pretty static situations where you're not moving around too much, it might be fine. But if you're walking, you know, that jumping around, it definitely is not as smooth as other cameras that I've used and other lenses that I've used. I'm going to put the review of the last two lenses that I did here and here. This one is going to be the Sigma, the 56 millimeter that I used over the last couple of weeks. I really like this lens. And then the fisheye lens that I bought, the 7 Artisans fisheye lens. Okay, see you in the next video.